So you're blessing thousands of people, you know, from miles away,
Remotely.
and different languages, different countries, different people,
Right.
living, non-living. It's a breakthrough. I mean, I have studied science, but it's something which is very extraordinary that I've heard today from you.
Yeah. But in fact, 3 of our clinical trials were conducted remotely. So with that located in the United States, while the participants are located in India, we have no idea who they are. We don't know their problems. We don't know their names. The investigators don't even know which group is
And
getting
how
the
do you
blessing.
solve their problems? I mean, okay, just
You
with the
just
blessing.
raise consciousness. Like I said, consciousness is the answer to all of it. Everything is an expression, lower levels and higher levels of consciousness.
Okay.
Consciousness has one function. How it operates is at higher levels of intensity, higher levels of consciousness, right? It organizes your entire being, your mind, your emotions, your physiology, and it evolves you to higher levels. Everything that we see, all the problems we see, all stem from lower levels of consciousness. We could say disorganized states of being.
Yeah.
Right?
Tell me something, is this data real? Dopamine up by 422% and inflammation down by 95%.
Yes.
Is this information real? Is
It
this
is
data
real.
real?
It is real.
That it's a revolution.
And protein increased by as much as 685%.
Okay, so but why has the government not picked this up then?
It has. It's available with the National Institutes of Health. It's been indexed by over 3,000 universities in over 100 countries.
In mainstream?
Right, mainstream universities, Harvard, MIT, Cambridge, Oxford, all these universities have them. They're in their public libraries and they're, indexed within their libraries. So they're all available. The issue is that, until you're actually able to provide maybe a product or apply it to an industry, right, there's going to be a lot of hesitancy from people to accept it. And I feel like that's only natural because so many times we're used to, right, like I said, a world of inauthenticity or a world of charlatans. You have religion and spirituality where you have a lot of distrust there because science can't infiltrate that zone because everything's subjective and faith-driven, right? So you have a lot of people who can abuse those privileges, right? I call it a privilege when you have, working with human belief alone, because you can take advantage of people. You take all their money, you can manipulate, you can abuse them, you can molest them, you can do all these sorts of things. And we've heard all those stories from many different false gurus and charlatans and so-called healers from the spirituality, right? So many people who have, now been like incarcerated recently, or we're finding out worked with like the Epstein and all these different things, right? We're finding all these things that are coming to light now from these people who have put on a show. They've done good marketing, right? But they have no real legitimate science behind it. So I really feel we need to bring integrity back to science and as well as back to religion and spirituality. Science is also a new religion to certain contexts because science, we're dealing with scientists who have their own bias. And the reason of that is because, right, you take a lot of predominant scientific themes, right? Nobody ever tested for themselves. We trust it. You read it in a textbook, a teacher tells you it, so you assume it's true because science has proven its reliability over the years. You never go inside your home after you learn that water boils at 100 degrees centigrade and go in and check the temperature it actually starts boiling at, right? A lot of these experiments we don't conduct ourselves because of our trust, our faith in science. We believe them to be true, and all of our scientific understanding, all of our medicine, all of agriculture, everything is based on the assumption science knows what it's talking about. And unfortunately, we found, right, with all these issues and what we're able to produce, science doesn't have the correct dominant theme about reality. So one scientist told me, as we were working together, Dr. Claude Swanson, he said, there's a saying that goes, science progresses, one funeral at a time. Basically saying at the death of old, scientists with their own, rigorous biases and, belief systems, that science has the opportunity to progress when the new generation comes in. But I feel like this will happen even faster than that because what we're talking about is fulfilling a need. When you fulfill a need, right, that's where industries are built upon. That's where entrepreneurs find their success. That's where human life is driven upon. We all find needs fulfilled somewhere, whether it's science, whether it's medicine, religion, spirituality, everything is there to fulfill a need within us. When that need can't be fulfilled elsewhere and they find the need fulfilled through what we're doing, through the outcomes we're presenting, then that trust will be established. And slowly, I feel like old dominant levels of understanding will fall away on their own.
Correct. Let's talk about a different angle also.
Yes.
What if someone comes to you, takes the blessing, but he doesn't feel anything, there is no change? What happens then?
Well, the beauty of that is you don't need to feel a change for there to be a change, right? You can still measure your blood. You can still measure all these other parameters. We like to educate people because sometimes you have an expectation versus reality, right? We want to marry Princess Diana, right? When we get a blessing, we want to, be able to levitate when we get a blessing, right?
Okay.
There's certain expectations that we have that we want versus reality. And when we're not meeting those kinds of expectations because they're unreasonable, right? And nature doesn't work that way. Physiology doesn't work that way, right? Life doesn't work that way.
What if an atheist comes to you, and someone who doesn't believe in God, but comes to you, pays for the blessing, and then things doesn't work out for him? What happens then?
Atheism has nothing to do with it.
No?
So, right, think of all the experiments we've done. We've conducted, a few experiments on people. A majority of them have been conducted on non-living materials, on plants, animals, microbes, bacteria, viruses, fungi, metals, ceramics, polymers, and chemicals. How many of things have a belief system? How many of things have faith in God? How many of these things meditate and say a puja, say a prayer? How many of these things worship God or do anything in their life to deliver such an unprecedented outcome? What we've seen is belief systems, psychology. We've eliminated psychology. We've eliminated belief. We've even eliminated people altogether. Right?
Okay.
And then on top of that, we've also, conducted these on so many things that people have hesitated out of fear of conducting them on because, they believe that maybe something in psychological data will be reflected because of belief alone. But non-living materials, how many people would touch non-living materials confidently? Right? When my Guruji, right, he's the one that founded all this and started this. When he started this scientific research, right, he went to material scientists saying, let's work together. Let's figure this out. Like, let's collaborate. That led him to working with one of the most renowned material scientists of our time, Dr. Rustum Roy, right? He's considered one of the fathers of material science for all of its scientific foundations and understanding. He was so fascinated with this guru that came from India that's seeking scientific corroboration, right, to validate his abilities. And at the same time, he saw the results. He saw the laws of physics being changed. Right? He saw all these things happening and he was like, this I've never seen. He's worked on the structure of water, on other healers, changing the structure of water and everything. And he's well familiar with those studies, but none of them paralleled even remotely what Guruji Trivedi was doing with his material science. And on top of that, I like to tell people that we have people from all different backgrounds. Right? We have Christians, we have Hindus, we have Buddhists, we have atheists, we have people from all different backgrounds, from, the Muslim community, everybody. It doesn't matter. It doesn't seem to matter what you believe in, what your faith is.
How does this work with the enlightened person? Once you're enlightened, you don't age, you don't grow old, or
aging is normal.
Or do you feel frustrated like any other normal people?
No,
do
not
you forget
in the same
things?
way, I'd say.
Do you forget things?
Oh, yeah, I'm human. I'll forget things.
How does this work with you?
I mean, like I said, one of the greatest parameters is you have control over your mind, right? Which gives you access to these higher levels of consciousness. So, right, there's this mastery over the mind that, you have the ability to regulate your thoughts and your emotions, right? This is permanent calmness and peace, this stillness that exists within you, and you carry it wherever you go. It's like you are that temple. It's like, in a lot of religious books, they always say, the kingdom of God is within you, from Christianity and all these different things. It's true. You carry that wherever you go. In the same way, you renounce the world, you run off to the Himalayas, you carry yourself wherever you go. That's not the answer. The answer is in consciousness, at the level of consciousness. So, but, I go through the same trials and tribulations dealing with, like biased scientists.
Because some days you have a bad day, some days you have a good day. So, That's what
Yeah.
I wanted to ask. How
Well,
does that
the
work?
beauty is even the bad days, when you're coming from this level of consciousness, that's all opportunities for growth from that level. That's how you see them, and that's how you experience them. That's how they actually register, right? You take the good from it. It's like a lotus growing in the mud. So, right, you have all this mud, you can't get rid of the mud, but what happens is the lotus still grows. So it's like you have this experience, you're able to take the beneficial parts of it. In the same way, from higher levels of consciousness, you absorb the good nutrition from food and are able to detoxify the bad, qualities from the food. Same way with the mind. The mind can pull the good from the environment and detoxify all the useless thoughts, all the useless emotions, everything. It's like a spiritual immunity that you gain from higher levels of consciousness that reflects on all levels. Again, mental, emotional, physical, but all these things are touched upon in every aspect of life and everything that you do. So everything, even struggles, becomes actually like, something wonderful for you. It becomes growth. We've had a lot of struggle. We've had, I wanted to tell you about this, right? I love to share this story where recently we've had a few publications in this journal, and I won't share the journal publicly, but we have enough record between our communication. But right, we have over 670 peer-reviewed publications, right? Which is, if you know anything about the peer review process, right? Whenever you're a scientist, you want to get a peer review publication. It's very authentic. Right? It's a whole group of your peers approving the data, materials, methods, saying, everything's legitimate. This is great data. Let's publish it. Gives you the green light. So it's a way of maintaining scientific credibility and authenticity, legitimacy, integrity, all of that. That's the peer review process. Most scientists will get maybe like a dozen peer reviews in their whole life. We have 670. So that shows the scale of our number, right?
Correct.
On top of that, just recently in one of the journals that we've already published a few articles in, right? So we had a specific editor, and on the peer review board, right, we have PhD level scientists that will like read the article, go through the data, check everything, make sure there are no flaws, issues, right? Basically like review the entire study, data, protocol, all of it. And these are PhD level scientists, so they're very accredited. So they'll check through everything and they'll give their approval. Like either they'll say, okay, this is ready for publication, they'll reject it, or they'll send it back and tell you some changes need to be made. Right? So most of the peer review boards have like maybe 3 or 4 PhD level scientists at most. Right? So ours was sent to 4 PhD level scientists, right? All of them reviewed it, went through everything, found nothing wrong, found the data extraordinary, were excited about publishing it, said, yes, this needs to be published. They greenlit it.
Was published?
Right? All 4 of them. No, it wasn't published. So all 4 of them greenlit the publication, right? The editor sent it to one more PhD level scientist, said, can you, review this for me? He approved it, sent it to another, they approved it, sent it to another, they approved it, sent it to another. Eventually, it went through 9 PhD level scientists from his review board that he wanted to, he or she wanted to look through and make sure, is this legitimate? Is the data real? Like, how do you feel about this? All of them, all 9 scientists approved the publication for being published, right? But it was still rejected at the last minute by the editor himself, who said that I simply don't believe that the data is real and that this can happen, that you can bless a group. This is one of our clinical trials. That you can bless a group remotely from the United States all across on the other side of the world and get this kind of data as well. I don't believe that that's possible, so I'm not going to publish it. So for that reason alone, it was rejected. Even though 9 PhD level scientists approved it and said there's nothing wrong with it. Because the data was unprecedented. So you can imagine the struggle that we've been through over decades of doing this. And we wanted to wait until we had these clinical trials in place and some publications there before we presented this with the world, which is another reason why you haven't heard about us, right? Because it takes a huge amount of time, effort, money. And we're all about transparency and authenticity. We want to bring integrity back to spirituality, to God, because this is a big mission. And we don't want there to be any flaws, any issues with it, right? Any lack of transparency. We want to represent the data correctly. And so I'm willing to admit if I represent it wrong, I'm willing to go back and correct myself to do whatever is needed for the sake of transparency and authenticity, because I feel it's so vitally important. And the message is so big that even if it's my own impediment and inability to deliver the right message, I'm happy to even take myself out of the equation. That's how important this is, I feel, for the world.
Dahryn, let's talk about trauma. We know trauma isn't just about memory. Trauma lives in our body, in our cells, right? And can a blessing reach to that level, in that depth where trauma can be healed?
Absolutely. In fact, like that's one of the premise of our clinical trials is people who have severe trauma, severe mental and emotional health problems.
Okay.
But I like to just give an overview of what trauma is exactly. Trauma is usually when either we've suppressed our emotions or the world, something in some situation, another person or circumstance has forced our emotions to become suppressed, right? We've been forced to live in an emotional reality that we're uncomfortable with. That's essentially what trauma is. So, one example of trauma, and you can see how trauma is reflected from different levels of consciousness. Most psychologists, if you talk to them, they'll say trauma lingers for the rest of your life, right? You can maybe improve the degrees by which you experience it or live with it, reframe it for yourself, give it different context. But a lot of psychologists believe that even with, dosing on drugs and therapy and all these things, trauma continues till you die. That's what a lot of psychologists and scientists firmly believe. Trauma is so residual, it goes down to your very DNA, your genetics, your core of who you are. And they found out they even pass on experiences and likings and dislikings and things genetically to your children. So you can pass trauma down genetically as well, right? Aversions and likings and dislikings, all of that is genetically passed down. So trauma is very severe, and people underestimate the influence of emotions and our mental state on our physical well-being as well. It is such a big influencing factor. There's a real reason why there is a mind-body connection, right? And so trauma, when you look at it from a lower level of consciousness, I give this example where you take a woman, right, who, was absolutely in love with this man, right? And they had a wonderful relationship. And we've applied this realistically too with real human testimonials. So these are real examples. This is just a story though. You take a woman who's been rejected suddenly out of nowhere. They've lived together, loved each other for years, right? And suddenly he says, I don't love you anymore. We're mismatched, right? He rejects, says, I hate you, everything about you, right? Completely rejected, throwing this woman on the street. This woman's living with trauma now. Right. And this trauma is everything. It manifests as mental restlessness, like poor quality sleep, poor energy. Their whole metabolic system is in havoc. Their, anxiety, depression, it's a whole host of problems. Menstrual problems start to arise from all of that. You have all these situations that arise from this traumatic experience. This woman starts to doubt her value, her self-worth, right? Loses inspiration, motivation, wants to just lay in bed and rot, right? As this term goes, all of that, right? That's from a lower level of consciousness. From a higher level of consciousness, we've seen this. We've seen people who leave relationships even with the blessing. And what happens is, as a result, when this relationship separates, even if they're rejected, they don't suffer from the complex of the rejection. What happens as a result is they're at peace with it. They're okay. Instead, how they take it, how they internalize it, how their mind takes it in, right? And facilitates it within their being and gives it the framework within them without them having to do anything on their own, without them having to, like give themselves positive affirmations and work themselves up. They automatically reframe it as, this is good for me. This is something that's beneficial. Nothing wrong happened. This relationship was not good for me. They were toxic. This is bad. This is actually the grace of God working in my life. My soulmate is out there. I'm being taken care of. Everything's good. Their confidence is higher. Their self-worth is higher. They feel more appreciated and valued afterwards. It's like trauma takes a different, direction. It's like kicked out of their lives and instead something else takes root. Right. And it builds their confidence and their motivation. And they go out and they usually find their soulmate, somebody that's a better match for them, better destiny. So we've seen this reflected in the clinical trials as well. And so what we've done is for several of our clinical trials, right, I told you 3 of them were conducted remotely. And in these same clinical trials, they were the same ones that were double blinded. So we didn't know, investigators didn't know, so no bias with them picking, the cherry picking data from different groups of people. And even the, recipients who received the blessing didn't know they were getting a blessing. We had a psychological group who thought they were getting a blessing from a fake healer, a fake guru, right? So we could eliminate psychological data, and a control group that didn't receive anything, right? And we're measuring at 0, day 90, and day 180. So over a long period of time, right? We're talking like half a year here. And then on top of that, we're only blessing twice and all done remotely. So on day 0, after we measure their baseline data, right? And then at day 90, right, to check improvements. And we're measuring during all 3 of those, interaction periods. And we're measuring things as well as like psychological assessments from a third-party clinical, psychologist who's licensed for this kind of work, who's licensed to eliminate subjective data and try and get to the root cause of psychological trauma and issues. And these people are coming to us with severe mental and emotional health problems, like anything from PTSD, emotional trauma, sadness, suicidal tendencies, depression, right? And, issues that reflect low libido, poor menstrual wellness, low quality of sleep, right? And, fatigue, all these things that are just kind of reflected. They also have poor relationships, issues with their finances, all of these things that contribute or are affected by mental and emotional well-being. Right. So we're taking all of these, doing, a very extensive psychological analysis before and after and during the whole protocol. And on top of that, we're measuring something called the NIH Toolbox for Cognition and Motor Function, which is implemented by the National Institutes of Health for all clinical trials for anybody who wants to, approve or test the efficacy of a specific, therapy or drug. Usually it's there to determine if there are any adverse effects on cognition and motor function, because we've never seen really overall improvements. Okay. It's usually there to measure if there's something wrong with a drug or therapy, to see if there's something adversive, like if chemotherapy is worth it for the type of cancer we're treating, because it affects your, whole body as well. So we're measuring those kind of parameters. And in cognition, motor function, we're measuring everything from memory, executive function, language skills, and then for motor function, we're measuring things like locomotion, dexterity, standing balance, endurance, right? A bunch of different parameters for both, right? And then what we're doing is these toolboxes for cognition and motor function was developed by the National Institutes of Health as the gold standard because it eliminates psychological and subjective data from the analysis. It's a completely randomized test, so it eliminates biases from both the participant and the investigator. It's completely randomized. You don't know what question will be asked, what test will be done next, what exactly will be a part of the test. Everything's randomized, and it's controlled and operated by the server within the National Institutes of Health in the United States. And once it's locked in there, you can't go back and change it. So the moment an answer is in there, you can't manipulate the data. So it's the gold standard, very legitimate, for very high profile clinical trials. All of these have used this type of testing. And it's been conducted and implemented since 2012. Okay. Right. So we've used the same protocol for these people, and we've found in every single tested parameter for the NIH Toolbox for Cognition and Motor Function about near 100% improvement across every single tested parameter. 100%. Nearly 100% improvement across the board. Right. They only see usually adverse effects or no effects. Okay. Right. No adverse effects, no adverse events, they call.
Tell me something. How much time does it take for a blessing to pass?
Moments. It's like a minute or 2.
And I can see the effect immediately.
So the effect takes time, right? Now, what a lot of people report immediately, and this matches with like what your physiology and everything does. We like to say, most people will experience good quality sleep on that night, that very same night, right? People who have issues with insomnia, poor quality sleep issues, they're unable to have a proper night's sleep in years, right? One person, a very high profile client came to us for that exact reason. They were suffering from huge anxiety disorder, unable to sleep properly at night. Just one blessing, and that night, he said the anxiety vanished and he slept like a baby, woke up more refreshed than he ever had in his entire life.
Yeah.
right? That can happen with one blessing.
Yeah.
Everybody's different. I like to remind everybody you're all different. Everybody comes from different paths in life, different levels of deterioration, different problems. But there's one solution for all those problems. And I like to say it's evolving your consciousness. So depending upon your current level of consciousness and where you need to go to resolve those problems, it's a longer journey or a shorter journey. But some of these effects are reflected more faster, more immediately than others. Those being like your quality of sleep within a couple weeks at most is reflected usually almost immediately, right? Your quality of your skin. Most people find after 2 weeks of time, because it takes 2 weeks for your cells to turn over completely in your skin, you see that you have a healthy glow on complexion, a more even skin tone, healthy glow about you. You start to observe
No
that
medication, no nothing,
medication,
just a
nothing.
blessing, right?
These people in the clinical trial, they never changed their lifestyle. They did nothing different. They just got the
Okay.
blessing,
Okay.
right? And so we're saying, observing people, one of the biggest things that people experience is mental calmness and peace almost immediately, right? Within a few days, even from the blessing. Happiness, they feel content, satisfied,
Yeah.
right? These things manifest a lot quicker, a lot faster. And then the other things, if there's severe degeneration, I like to say everybody runs on a spectrum, like -100, 0, and +100. If you're at -5, you'll probably see +5 sooner than somebody on -100, right? And so part of the process is reversing the deterioration, which, by the way, there's not a lot of drugs or therapies out there that can reverse deterioration once it's happened. They can manage and maintain, prevent maybe some things from getting worse, but a lot of it is management.
Yeah.
A lot of things don't reverse. We've seen reversal where people actually experience like anti-aging, right? And more bioavailability in our clinical trial. We've seen that people absorb nutrition better. They absorb more nutrition from their food. They detoxify. They have better insulin sensitivity, right? They have better cholesterol levels. They have better biomarkers. Inflammation, you said 95%, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't see that result.
But don't you think somewhere it's psychology also? Like if I know I want to get better and if I'm going to you to, seek these blessings and you're giving me blessings. So already it's in my mind, it's in my psychology, okay, something good is going to happen, something.
That's
Don't
why
you
we
think?
have the placebo group, the psychological group. In every clinical trial, we have a placebo psychological group for people who think they're getting a blessing, who people think something's good going to happen to them. These results, this 685% improvement in Clotho, this improvement in oxytocin and dopamine and vitamin nutrient absorption, like 50% improvement, 30%, 90%, 95% reduced inflammation, right? All of these things are in comparison to the placebo and the control.
Okay.
That's not like the placebo group I'm talking about. Those results, I agree, they'll have some kind of influence and some minimal impact you will see reflected, which is why we have that as a protocol in order to eliminate subjective placebo data. So the results we're getting is what's happened when you compare it even to a psychological group.
Okay.
You get that much more efficacy from the treatment.
Okay. See, our generation is not rejecting God. Our generation is rejecting the middleman,
Right.
the middleman who is in between, who's in between the God and us. So what makes you different? What is the difference between you and the other people who are like putting themselves out between us and the divine? What is the difference?
Well, it's simply my level of consciousness, right? I've had my own journey. I've evolved my consciousness through my guru's blessings and nurturing. So I had a direct connection, right? So I was able to facilitate and speed up my process faster than most people because of my connection to my guru, right? He helped facilitate, speed up that. But I would also say on top of that, what really makes us a better conductor for this energy, this applies to everybody, right, is something called the divine principles and fundamentals. Right? It's what maintains your purity and your innocence. That's what makes you a better conductor for this energy, right? You become a superconductor the more innocent and pure you are. I like to say I led my life with God as my goal and God as my love. So for me, I felt like my life began with that purity and I was able to maintain it and hold it, which is why my evolution happened so quickly. Right? I kind of had that background, that substrate already set for me. But other people who maybe are not like that, right? There's a certain teaching that we like to say where, again, I'm talking about there's something absolute that exists beyond us, right? And so there's a certain set of rules in place, you could say, or laws, or just way and order in which the world works. There's a divine order that operates and governs our existence, right? There are ways that we conduct ourselves in our lives that works for our evolution or against it, right? There are certain ways that we behave, certain thoughts we think, certain people we have around us, certain circumstances, right? Thoughts, behaviors, feelings, all of these things, right? That come from lower levels of consciousness. You see things like hypocrisy, betrayal, dishonesty, selfishness, those kinds of qualities. Those are embodiments. Those are reflections, emanations of lower states of consciousness. Now, what happens from that lower state, right? If you're evolving yourself, if you're getting these blessings, for example, right? You're going to evolve into higher states of consciousness. You will naturally reflect without having to force yourself, right, to embody or reflect these changes. You will become more empathetic. You'll become more compassionate. But if you already have those characters within you, then naturally you become like a superconductor. I like to give an example of an iron bar versus a magnetic iron bar. You have an iron bar, the atoms are haphazard, they're everywhere, right? That's what makes up an iron bar. What makes a magnetic iron bar magnetic is that the atoms within the molecules, they're very much in discipline with each other. They're aligned. What are they aligned with? They're not aligned with the iron bar. They're aligned with magnetic energy. A magnetic iron bar doesn't produce magnetic energy, doesn't generate it, it harnesses it. So a magnetic iron bar, when these atoms are aligned, they allow these channels or these pathways for this magnetic energy to flow through it, and it creates this field of magnetism. In the same way, if we discipline ourselves with the fundamentals of life, basically this is the implementation of higher consciousness in action. It's the implementation. It's how consciousness is reflected from higher states, which is sacrifice, caring, empathy. When we embody these characters and we implement them in our lives, we are working towards our evolution. When you embody those poor characters, you make those bad decisions, you think those bad thoughts, you have those bad relationships, right? You're actually working against your evolution. You're working against the same program and function that consciousness has, because consciousness, its whole purpose is to organize and evolve. And we're working against the very system that organizes and evolves us when we're participating in those kinds of activities in our life. And sometimes it's not even like a bad intention, right? The intention is good, but the way you conduct ourselves, there are ways that that make us feel more energized, that give us more energy, or make us feel disconnected, make us feel like we've lost something. So I mean, that's part of what we nurture here too, is like how you can evolve yourself faster with this energy, but also how you can sustain that connection, right? Make it permanent.
So one last question I have today is, let's talk about women's health. 30% of women's, all of us go through menstrual problems, PCOD, PCOS. Modern medicines are still arguing about the basics of female biology, right? So how does spirituality and consciousness see this about a female's body, and how does this help us?
So females are a very unique category, I like to say. They're actually very good conductors of this energy. They're unusually receptive, right, to these divine blessings, even more so than men, I'd like to say, depending on the consciousness of the men, of course. But they're unusually highly receptive. So when we look at a woman's nature, right, if you look at what science and medicine has disregarded, that's been women. We have been disregarded, misdiagnosed,
What is science ignoring here?
Because all the science studies in the past, what they've been conducted on? Male bodies. There are distinct differences between a male and a female body. Right? Huge differences in hormones, system regulation, everything, even our own bladders, right? The size of our organs, the way they're connected and operate, everything's different about us, right? And the sensitivity, right? We go through cycles. Men are more linear. We go through cycles. We ebb and flow. We follow pathways that nature follows, right? We are probably more sensitive and in tune with nature than the average man is, right? That is our gift as well as our highest detriment. But as a result, because science, that's why they're the biggest, consumer of the wellness industry, because they've been ignored for so long, right? We haven't conducted enough studies on women to truly understand them. So our physiology and our health was assumed. Our physiologies were always assumed by science and medicine. It was never affirmed. It was never studied or investigated properly. We were treated as men with breasts, and that's not the truth at all, right? We're very distinctly different.
Yeah.
So we've been vitally misunderstood. And whenever you go to a doctor, right, you give them a problem you're facing, they're always said that's normal, or just being a woman, or, they find a problem with anything. We're considered overly sensitive, too emotional, right? All these things are attributed to women. And while they are emotional, they are sensitive, but that's an intelligence. That's highly misunderstood by our society that does not appreciate it properly. That emotion and that intelligence, it is our very gift, and it is what makes us such good receivers and such good growers with this energy. Right? Because what is this sensitivity? It's an inherent intelligence that lives in every single woman. That's why you say a woman's intuition is so strong, where she can feel the mood in a room before somebody else can, right? She can understand what's happening with her children from the other side of the world, right? There are certain things a woman just picks up on very easily. If you look at ecosystems worldwide, what are the I guess, animals or creatures that collapse first when an ecosystem collapses? It's the most sensitive beings that collapse first, right? When you see an ecosystem fail, you see, frogs die off first.
Okay.
Right? Because they absorb toxicity more, right? There's something about the frog's physiology where they're more sensitive to toxicity. It reflects more, they die off faster. Okay. So they reflect a failing ecosystem first. Same thing with butterflies. You see, before food chains unravel, butterflies die. Right? It shows a lack of diversity in our ecosystem and in our environment. It shows that there's a failure somewhere in the chain, in the food chain. All of these things are starting to fail. Same way, if you look at women's health and what women are going through, women are more likely than men, much more likely to have a mental and emotional health problem diagnosable. Right? And at the same time, if you look at the number of women with menstrual wellness problems and menopause problems, we could say the number is like 30% of diagnosed with like endometriosis, PCOS, those kinds of problems. But if you look at the actual statistically reported number of women who have things like heavy bleeding, who have like severe cramping, emotional mood swings, all these things that we're taught are normal as children and born and raised with as being normal. Like it's normal to have a heavy bleeding period for 10 days with no pain or a huge pain, right? Mood swings, or it could be 2 days, it could be 6 days. We don't know the number because it's so volatile. We can't predict what it will be for everybody. Right? If you look at the people who have pain and issues with their menstrual cycle and menopause, 75% of women, 75% of women, they all have issues with their menstrual cycle and their menopause. Right? These are natural, normal cycles women go through. It's not pathology. It's not a disorder. It's not a disease. These are things that nature designed for us. These should be very natural and easy to go through. Right? In the same way childbirth is intuitive and natural, these same things. We're seeing fertility rates, right, decline as well. Huge infertility, issues worldwide. We're seeing that at more time than ever, women are suffering. And you see, other cultures, women are gaining their independence, their empowerment and everything, and women are still the greatest sufferers on this planet.
True.
Right? And so what we're seeing is they are like a thermometer. They are a reflector. They are receivers. So what does that mean? That means they're a great measure for abundance, for growth, for prosperity, as well as a great measure for detriment and toxicity. Our environment, our world, our mental health, everything is in such severe levels of toxicity. We have put such distress on women and their bodies and their minds. They're like the thermometers, the temperature of the environment. When it's getting too hot, women reflect it first. So we're reflecting the state of humanity first with all of these huge problems. It's reflecting our food crisis, the toxicity in our food. Right? It's reflecting our mental health crises. It's reflecting everything. We're the first embodiment of it. Right? And also we're the first to resolve when things get better. We're the first to reflect the good. Right? We're probably the greatest receivers because of that sensitivity. So what women are showing now in this day and age is the state of our food. It's the state of our environment. It's the amount of toxic chemicals that we're using in our food. Because if you look at menstrual wellness, part of what estrogen is metabolized, it's metabolized within our gut. Our whole microbiomes are thrown off because of all the toxic chemicals. We need a solution without them. Science is dependent upon them. We can't produce. We're at the risk of losing crops without using these chemicals, right? We're killing off our soil. We're depleting our soil, ruining our groundwater, ruining our air, right? You go to India, you can't even breathe. It's so toxic, the air pollution here. I hear everybody coughing the moment I arrive. It's like our environment has deteriorated rapidly because we're not understanding how to make these things happen through other means. Right. And then as a result, right, we're also seeing the mental health epidemic. We're seeing mental health, right? Suicide rates, all these things, huge influx. Especially we see that with the younger generation, suicidal tendencies are increasing. Their mortality rates are higher. When we're talking about longevity in life and the mortality rates going down in first world countries, what we're seeing is the youths are the ones that are dying, not the older generation, because they're killing themselves.
Depression and anxiety.
Depression is so huge that people don't want to live on this planet anymore.
Correct.
That's how bad life is here.
Yeah.
And so, right, women are reflectors of this. And we've seen that with the clinical trials, all of the women with this blessing, all of their mental health problems completely resolved. Everything reported. Right? Heavy bleeding, emotional problems, right? Poor fatigue and right? All these issues that they have completely resolved by the end of the clinical trial. And we've reported this number in over 300,000 people, like more than half of them women, because more of our clients are women than men, right? Because they experience the effects so dramatically. They experience it, completely resolutely. And so, they are great receivers for this energy, but they are the greatest indicators of a world in havoc, and they are the greatest implications that we have to show the effects of what this energy can do as women.
So, Dahryn, we have come to end of our conversation, but I would like you to tell our audience, like, how can they connect to you? How can they connect with Divine Connection? How can they get in touch? And if someone, for example, a 22-year-old boy or a girl who's like just a burnt out kid, going through depression, anxiety, or a woman going through a lot of problems in her life, people going through, many things in their relationships or financial loss, many things when we talk about, right? So what is the process? How can they get in touch with you? How can they get the blessing, if you can tell our audience?
Well, everything's available on our website, divineconnection.org. It's a nonprofit organization, right? It's a multifaceted mission. So you can read all about our mission objectives, everything there. Our science research is there. It's completely transparent, available for everybody to read, all of our publications, as well as we have our testimonials available. We have like hundreds of recorded and written testimonials from people reporting miraculous changes in their lives, right? All this is on our website. You can see our science research on places like Google Scholar. You can go to probably any university library and find our research there as well, at least find some of our publications available there as well. But all of our memberships, if people want to try just one blessing, we offer single blessings or whole memberships where people attend workshops and receive the blessings and a whole variety of different things. But essentially, when they join a membership, they're joining this mission. They're helping us grow the mission. They're helping contribute to the mission so that they can help further our work on our mission. They can help, fund it in a way and then participate and be a part of this, because this is a worldwide thing. And like I said before, it's like this is such an essential part. Like, the reason why 50% of the youths, at least in America, have left religion and, started, revering science or kind of being a little more, open-ended to different topics or ideas. It's because of the incapabilities of, religion and as well as spirituality, right? And even science now, to properly, demonstrate real outcome in their lives, right? And they've relied on science and technology. And so I truly feel that if we want this to be mainstream, and if all of us will adopt it in our lives, it will become a big, worldwide proportionate thing, then what will happen is that we really need to demonstrate outcome. And I feel like we are successfully doing that. We've done that with our 6,000 science studies, right? 300,000 people have experienced a blessing. We have incredible research and testimonials, and we have so many people that constantly are receiving blessings for the first time and, reporting extraordinary outcomes in their relationships, finances, health, well-being, mental peace, clarity, decision-making ability. Everything, their whole life changes. So when you realize the lack of answers out there and, everything has reached a certain limit, a certain impasse on their paths, right? And you see that, spirituality does have something to offer us, and that is through, you know, divine connection, what our organization is called, Divine Connection International.
Correct.
When you find that the answers are coming from there, it's kind of like the outcome will speak for itself. And I truly feel that that's happening now, and I'm happy to share it with you on this podcast. Thank you for, you know, having me here. I'm so grateful.
Thank you so much for sharing this knowledge with us, and people can get in touch with you, you know, to experience this magic and to get these divine blessings. So thank you
Phone
again.
number, email,
Yeah,
we have mailing
everything is
list, all of it's
available.
available there.
Yeah,
So please go there.
do your research. You trust what Dahryn is saying, and trust yourself also after doing the research.
Yes.
The trial papers are available, the research papers are available outside in the public domain, and then you can reach out to them.
Please do.
Yeah. Again, thank you.
Thank you.